In a world where everyone is talking, explaining, defending, and reacting to everything, there is a rare kind of person who moves differently, someone who does not rush to respond, does not feel the need to prove anything, and does not let emotions control their actions. At first, people misunderstand them. They think they are distant, cold, or uninterested, but over time, something changes. People begin to respect them, observe them, and even feel a quiet pressure around them. Why does this happen? And what do they understand that most people never will? The answer lies in a simple but powerful principle. The less you react, the less you explain, and the less you respond, the more control you gain over your life. Chapter 1. The power you give away every time you react. Every time you react emotionally, you give away a part of yourself, and most people never notice how often this happens throughout their day. Someone says something small, and your mood shifts. Someone ignores you, and your mind starts overthinking. Someone disrespects you, and you feel the urge to respond, to prove, or to defend. In all of these moments, your emotional state is no longer yours. It is being controlled by external triggers that you allowed to enter your inner world without resistance. Reaction is not just a response, it is a transfer of power, and the more you react, the more control you lose over your own mind. A silent mind understands this deeply, and instead of reacting instantly, it creates a pause, a space where awareness takes over impulse. In that pause, you begin to see clearly, and when you see clearly, you realize that not everything deserves your energy, not everything deserves your attention, and most importantly, not everything deserves a reaction. The less you react, the less control others have over you, and over time, this quiet control becomes your strength. Chapter 2. The Trap of Explanation: Why Defending Yourself Destroys You. There is a hidden weakness in constantly explaining yourself, even though it often feels like you are simply trying to be clear or understood. On the surface, explaining looks like confidence, like you are standing up for yourself, but in reality, it often comes from a deeper need to be accepted, approved, or validated by others. You want people to see your intentions, to agree with your decisions, and to understand why you did what you did. But the truth is, the more you try to control how people see you, the more control you give them over your peace. Every unnecessary explanation slowly trains your mind to depend on other people's opinions, and over time, you start measuring your decisions based on how they will be perceived instead of what you truly believe is right. The real problem is that no matter how clearly you explain yourself, people will still interpret things based on their own mindset, their own experiences, and their own biases. Some will understand you, some will misunderstand you, and some will judge you no matter what you say. So when you keep explaining, you are fighting a battle that can never be fully won, and that constant effort drains your energy and weakens your mental clarity. A silent mind understands this and chooses a different path. It accepts that misunderstanding is a natural part of life and stops trying to correct every opinion or assumption. This does not mean you become careless or arrogant. It means you become independent. You learn to trust your decisions without needing constant agreement, and you allow your actions to speak instead of your words. When you stop over-explaining, you create a sense of calm within yourself, because you are no longer chasing approval or trying to fix how others see you. And as this habit grows, something powerful begins to happen. Your confidence becomes internal, stable, and unshakable, because it is no longer built on other people's understanding, but on your own certainty. Chapter 3. Stillness as Dominance. The ancient art of saying nothing. Stillness is a level of control that most people never reach because they are constantly reacting, speaking, and trying to fill every moment with noise. Silence feels uncomfortable to them, so they rush to respond, to explain, or to prove something, without realizing that every unnecessary word weakens their position. A silent mind understands that power is not in speaking more, but in knowing when not to speak at all. When you choose stillness, you are not being passive, you are being intentional, because you are deciding not to reveal your thoughts, your emotions, or your next move to people who have not earned that access. When you say nothing in moments where others expect a reaction, you create a kind of pressure that most people cannot handle. They start to question themselves. They begin to wonder what you are thinking. And in that uncertainty, they often reveal more about themselves than you ever could by speaking. This is why stillness becomes dominance, not through force, but through control and awareness. You are no longer predictable, and what cannot be predicted cannot be easily influenced or manipulated. A silent mind observes everything without rushing to respond. It listens carefully, notices details, and understands the situation before taking any action. This allows you to move with clarity instead of emotion, and when you finally do speak, your words carry weight because they are not wasted. Over time, this habit builds a strong presence, where your calmness speaks louder than noise, and your control becomes your advantage in every situation. Chapter 4. They are testing you, how to pass every test without being tested. Every day, in ways that are often invisible and unspoken, people are testing you, not through formal challenges, but through small, subtle moments that reveal how much control you truly have over yourself. These tests do not come with warning signs. They appear in the form of a disrespectful comment, a delayed reply, an unfair situation, or someone trying to provoke a reaction out of you. Most people fail these tests instantly because they do not even realize they are being tested. They react emotionally, they try to defend themselves, they argue, they over-explain, and in doing so, they reveal exactly where they are weak and how easily they can be controlled. What feels like a normal reaction in the moment is actually a signal to others that your emotions can be influenced, your state can be disturbed, and your behavior can be predicted. The truth is, people are always observing how you respond under pressure, because your reactions tell them more about you than your words ever will. When someone pushes your limits, they are not just being difficult, they are unconsciously or intentionally checking how much power they have over your inner world. If you react strongly, you show them that they can affect you, and once someone knows they can affect you, they hold a certain level of control over you. This is why emotional reactions are dangerous, not because feelings are wrong, but because uncontrolled expression of those feelings makes you vulnerable in ways you do not notice in the moment. A silent mind approaches these situations differently. It does not rush to respond. It does not feel the need to prove anything, and it does not engage in unnecessary conflict. Instead, it observes the situation with awareness and remains steady, even when the pressure increases. This calmness is not weakness, it is control, because you are choosing not to give others access to your emotional state. When you do not react, you remove the reward that most people are unconsciously seeking, which is your attention, your energy, and your emotional response. Without that reward, the test loses its purpose, and the person testing you often loses interest because there is nothing to gain. Passing these tests is not about winning arguments or proving strength through words. It is about maintaining control over yourself, regardless of what is happening around you. When you stop reacting, you stop participating in the game altogether, and this is what makes you difficult to manipulate. People cannot figure you out easily. They cannot predict your behavior, and they cannot push you into emotional decisions. This creates a powerful shift in how others perceive you, because instead of seeing someone who reacts, they see someone who is stable, controlled, and unaffected. Over time, this approach changes your entire experience of life, because you no longer feel the need to respond to everything that happens. You become more selective with your energy, more intentional with your actions, and more aware of what truly deserves your attention. Situations that once triggered you lose their impact, and people who once had influence over your emotions begin to lose that power completely. This is what it means to pass every test without being tested. You are no longer playing a game that depends on reaction, explanation, or response. When you reach this level, something important happens. Your strength becomes internal instead of external. You do not need to prove anything to anyone because your control speaks for itself. You are no longer reacting to life. You are moving through it with clarity and discipline. And in that state, you become someone who cannot be easily shaken, manipulated, or controlled, no matter what situation you are placed in. Chapter 5. The Silence of the Wise. What great minds knew that the world forgot. There is a reason why the most powerful minds throughout history were not the loudest people in the room, because they understood something that the modern world has almost completely forgotten, that silence is not emptiness. It is control, it is awareness, and it is a form of strength that cannot be easily seen, but can always be felt. In today's world, everyone is encouraged to speak more, share more, react more, and prove more, as if constant expression is a sign of confidence, but in reality, most of this noise comes from a lack of inner stability, from the need to be noticed, validated, or understood by others. The wise, however, moved differently. They did not speak to fill space. They spoke with purpose, and when there was no purpose, they remained silent without feeling the need to justify that silence. A silent mind understands that words are not just sounds, they are energy, and every unnecessary word drains that energy. When you speak without intention, when you explain things that do not need explanation, or when you react to situations that do not deserve your response, you are slowly weakening your own presence without realizing it. The wise knew that preserving energy was essential, because energy is what fuels clarity, focus, and discipline. They were not silent because they had nothing to say. They were silent because they had learned to say only what truly mattered, and that restraint made their words carry weight when they finally chose to speak. Another truth that great minds understood is that silence allows you to see more than words ever could. When you are constantly talking, you are not observing, you are not listening, and you are not learning. But when you remain silent, you begin to notice details that others miss. You understand people's intentions more clearly, and you see situations from a deeper perspective. Silence sharpens your awareness, because instead of being caught in the need to respond, you are fully present, watching, analyzing, and understanding. This awareness becomes a powerful advantage because you are no longer reacting blindly. You are responding with clarity when it is truly necessary. The wise also understood that not every opinion deserves a response, and not every situation requires your involvement. Most people feel the urge to reply to everything, to correct others, to defend themselves, or to prove a point. But this habit traps them in endless cycles of unnecessary conflict and emotional exhaustion. A silent mind breaks this cycle by choosing what deserves attention and what should be ignored. This is not about avoidance, it is about discipline. It is about recognizing that your time and energy are limited, and wasting them on things that do not add value only pulls you further away from your own growth. Silence also builds a kind of presence that words cannot create. When you are calm, controlled, and not easily pulled into reactions, people begin to feel that stability, even if they cannot explain it. Your silence becomes a signal that you are not easily influenced, not easily provoked, and not dependent on external validation. This creates a level of respect that cannot be forced, because it comes naturally from your behavior. People start to think twice before testing you, not because you said anything, but because your actions have already shown them that you are not someone who can be easily shaken. Over time, this way of living transforms how you experience the world. You no longer feel the need to speak just to be heard. You no longer react just to feel in control. And you no longer explain yourself just to be understood. Instead, you move with intention, you speak with purpose, and you remain silent when silence is more powerful than words. This balance is what the wise mastered, and it is what most people today are missing. When you begin to apply this in your own life, you will notice a shift that is both subtle and powerful. Your mind becomes quieter, your thoughts become clearer, and your actions become more precise. You start to conserve your energy instead of wasting it, and that energy begins to build into something stronger, something more stable, something that cannot be easily disturbed. This is the silence of the wise, not a silence of weakness or fear, but a silence of strength, awareness, and control. And once you truly understand it, you realize that the less you feel the need to say, the more powerful you actually become. Chapter 6. Building the Fortress, Daily Practices of the Unbreakable Mind. An unbreakable mind is not something you are born with, and it is not something that appears overnight after a single moment of realization. It is something you build slowly, intentionally, and consistently through daily actions that most people overlook because they seem too simple to matter. The truth is, strength is not created in big moments. It is created in small, repeated choices that shape the way you think, react, and move through life. Every time you pause instead of reacting, every time you stay silent instead of explaining, and every time you choose control over impulse, you are placing another brick in the fortress of your mind. Over time, these bricks form a structure so strong that no external situation can easily break it. The first practice in building this fortress is awareness, because without awareness, you cannot change anything. Most people move through life on autopilot, reacting to situations without thinking, speaking without intention, and allowing their emotions to control their actions. They do not notice their patterns, they do not question their reactions, and they do not realize how much of their behavior is driven by habit rather than choice. A silent mind begins by observing itself, noticing thoughts as they arise, noticing emotions as they build, and recognizing the exact moment where a reaction is about to happen. This awareness creates a space between stimulus and response, and in that space, you gain the ability to choose a different path. The second practice is the discipline of pausing, which sounds simple, but is incredibly powerful when applied consistently. When something triggers you, your natural instinct is to react immediately, to respond, to defend, or to explain. But the moment you train yourself to pause, even for a few seconds, you interrupt this automatic pattern. In that pause, your emotions begin to settle, your thoughts become clearer, and you are no longer acting from impulse. This small habit, repeated daily, starts to rewire your mind, teaching it that not every situation requires an immediate response. Over time, this pause becomes your default, and your reactions become slower, more controlled, and more intentional. Another essential practice is reducing unnecessary noise in your life, because a noisy environment creates a noisy mind. When you are constantly surrounded by distractions, endless conversations, social media, and external opinions, your mind never gets the chance to settle. It becomes reactive, scattered, and dependent on stimulation. Building an unbreakable mind requires creating moments of silence, moments where you are not consuming anything, not reacting to anything, and simply allowing your mind to exist without interference. In these moments, your thoughts begin to organize themselves, your emotions begin to calm down, and you start to develop a deeper connection with your own mind. Along with reducing external noise, you must also reduce internal noise, which often comes from overthinking and unnecessary mental conversations. Most people spend a large part of their day replaying situations, imagining scenarios, or worrying about things that have not even happened. This constant mental activity drains energy and weakens focus. A silent mind practices letting go of these thoughts instead of feeding them. It understands that not every thought needs attention, and by choosing not to engage with unnecessary thinking, it creates a sense of calm that becomes stronger over time. Another powerful practice is learning to be comfortable with being misunderstood, because this is where most people break. They feel the need to explain themselves, to correct others, and to make sure they are seen in the right way. But this habit keeps them trapped in a cycle of dependence on external validation. Building a strong mind means accepting that people will misunderstand you, judge you, and form opinions that are not accurate, and being completely okay with it. When you stop trying to control how others see you, you free yourself from a massive amount of mental pressure, and that freedom strengthens your inner stability. Consistency is what turns these practices into real strength, because doing them once or twice will not change anything. You must apply them daily, in small situations, in conversations, in moments of stress, and even when it feels uncomfortable. The more you practice, the more natural it becomes, and eventually, it stops feeling like effort. Your mind begins to default to calmness instead of reaction, to silence instead of explanation, and to control instead of impulse. This is when the fortress truly begins to take shape, not as something you have to force, but as something that becomes part of who you are. Another important element of this process is emotional endurance, which is the ability to feel emotions without being controlled by them. Many people think strength means not feeling anything, but that is not true. Strength is feeling everything and still maintaining control over your actions. When anger arises, you do not act on it immediately. When frustration builds, you do not let it dictate your behavior. And when stress appears, you do not allow it to take over your mind. This level of endurance is built through practice, through repeatedly choosing control over reaction until your mind becomes stable even in intense situations. You also strengthen your mind by setting clear internal standards, because without standards, you become influenced by external circumstances. When you decide that you will not react impulsively, that you will not explain unnecessarily, and that you will not respond to things that do not deserve your attention, you create a framework for your behavior. This framework guides your actions, even when emotions are strong, because you have already decided who you are and how you will act. Over time, these standards become your identity, and your behavior aligns with them naturally. As this fortress continues to grow, you will start to notice changes not only in yourself, but in how others respond to you. People will find it harder to provoke you, harder to predict you, and harder to influence your decisions. Your calmness will create a sense of stability that others can feel, and your silence will carry more weight than words ever could. This is not something you force, it is something that happens naturally as a result of your inner work. Eventually, you reach a point where your mind is no longer easily shaken by external events, because your strength comes from within. Situations that once disturbed you no longer have the same effect, and people who once influenced your emotions lose their control over you. You become more focused, more disciplined, and more aligned with your own path, because your energy is no longer scattered across unnecessary reactions and explanations. This is what it means to build the fortress of an unbreakable mind, not through sudden transformation, but through daily discipline, awareness, and control. It is a process that requires patience, consistency, and commitment, but the result is a level of inner strength that cannot be easily broken. When your mind becomes this strong, you are no longer reacting to life, you are directing it, and in that state, you become someone who is calm under pressure, clear in decision-making, and unshakable in the face of challenges. Chapter 7. The Life That Waits on the Other Side of Silence. There is a life waiting for you that most people never experience, not because it is rare or impossible, but because they never reach the level of control required to enter it. This life exists on the other side of silence, beyond the constant need to react, beyond the urge to explain yourself, and beyond the habit of responding to everything that happens around you. Most people live in a state of emotional noise where every small event affects them, every opinion disturbs them, and every situation pulls them in different directions. But when you step into silence, you step out of that chaos and into a completely different way of living. It is not a life where problems disappear, but it is a life where problems no longer control you, and that difference changes everything. When you begin to master silence, the first thing that changes is your relationship with your own mind. You are no longer overwhelmed by thoughts. You are no longer pulled into endless overthinking, and you are no longer reacting to every emotion that arises. Instead, you start to observe your thoughts with distance, almost as if they are passing clouds rather than commands you must follow. This creates a sense of clarity that most people rarely feel, because your mind is no longer crowded with unnecessary noise. Decisions become easier, not because life becomes simple, but because your thinking becomes clear and focused. You begin to see situations for what they are, without adding layers of emotional reaction on top of them. Another transformation happens in your emotional state, because silence brings stability. When you stop reacting to everything, your emotions stop fluctuating constantly. You are no longer experiencing extreme highs and lows based on how people treat you, what they say, or how situations unfold. Instead, you develop a steady inner state that remains consistent regardless of what is happening outside. This does not mean you stop feeling. It means your feelings no longer control your behavior. You feel emotions, but you do not become them. And this creates a calmness that becomes your foundation. Your relationships also begin to change in a powerful way, because when you stop reacting, explaining, and responding unnecessarily, people start to see you differently. Those who relied on provoking you or getting a reaction from you lose their influence, because there is nothing for them to control. At the same time, people who value calmness and stability are naturally drawn to you, because your presence feels grounded and secure. You stop attracting chaos, and you start attracting respect, not because you demand it, but because your behavior naturally creates it. Silence becomes a filter that removes unnecessary connections and strengthens meaningful ones. Another important shift happens in how you use your energy. Before silence, your energy is scattered across reactions, arguments, explanations, and unnecessary thoughts. You spend your mental and emotional resources on things that do not truly matter, leaving you drained and unfocused. But when you embrace silence, you begin to conserve that energy, and what was once wasted becomes available for growth, focus, and purpose. You start to invest your energy into things that actually move your life forward, your goals, your discipline, and your personal development. This shift alone can transform your entire direction, because energy, when focused, becomes power. As you continue on this path, you also develop a deeper sense of independence, because you are no longer relying on others for emotional stability. You do not need constant communication to feel secure. You do not need validation to feel confident, and you do not need approval to feel certain about your decisions. This independence is not isolation, it is freedom. It is the ability to stand strong within yourself regardless of who is present or absent in your life. You begin to enjoy your own company, your own thoughts, and your own path, and this self-sufficiency becomes one of your greatest strengths. Silence also sharpens your awareness of the world around you, because when you are not constantly reacting or speaking, you begin to notice things that others miss. You see patterns in behavior, you understand people more clearly, and you recognize situations before they fully unfold. This awareness allows you to move through life with a level of intelligence and precision that most people never develop because they are too distracted by their own reactions. You are no longer just participating in life, you are observing it, understanding it, and navigating it with clarity. Over time, your identity begins to shift because you are no longer the person who reacts emotionally, who explains everything, or who feels the need to respond to every situation. You become someone who is calm, controlled, and intentional. This new identity is not something you pretend to be, it is something you naturally become through consistent practice. And once this identity is established, it becomes very difficult for anything external to disturb it, because your strength is no longer dependent on circumstances, it is rooted within you. The most powerful part of this transformation is the sense of peace that comes with it, a peace that is not dependent on people, situations, or outcomes. It is a peace that exists because your mind is no longer in conflict with itself, because you are no longer chasing approval, fighting misunderstandings, or reacting to every small disturbance. This peace is stable, deep, and lasting, and once you experience it, you realize how much unnecessary suffering you were creating before. Eventually, you reach a point where silence is no longer something you practice, it becomes who you are. Your presence becomes calm, your mind becomes clear, and your actions become precise. You move through life without unnecessary noise, without wasted energy, and without being controlled by external influences. This is the life that exists on the other side of silence, a life of clarity, stability, and inner strength that most people never reach because they never learn to let go of reaction, explanation, and response. And when you fully step into this life, you realize something that changes everything, that the real power was never in controlling others, it was in mastering yourself. Once you have that mastery, nothing outside of you has the ability to control you anymore, and that is the moment you truly become unbreakable. Chapter 8. The final level, when you no longer need to prove anything. There comes a point in your journey where something inside you shifts so deeply that it changes the way you see everything, not because the world has changed, but because you have finally stepped out of the need to be seen, understood, or validated by it. This is the final level of a silent mind, a place where you no longer feel the urge to react, explain, or respond, not because you are forcing yourself to stay quiet, but because you genuinely see no reason to. The battles that once felt important begin to look meaningless. The opinions that once disturbed you lose their weight, and the situations that once triggered you no longer have the same power over your mind. Most people spend their entire lives trying to prove something, trying to prove they are right, trying to prove they are worthy, trying to prove they are strong, successful, or important. This constant need to prove creates a hidden pressure that keeps their mind restless, because no matter how much they achieve, it never feels enough. There is always another person to impress, another opinion to correct, another situation to respond to. But when you reach this level of inner control, you realize that the need to prove is the very thing that was keeping you trapped. The moment you let go of that need, your mind becomes lighter, clearer, and far more powerful. At this stage, silence is no longer a strategy, it becomes your natural state. You are not silent because you are trying to appear strong. You are silent because you are strong. You do not feel the need to explain yourself because you trust your decisions completely. You do not feel the need to react because you are no longer emotionally dependent on external situations. You do not feel the need to respond because you understand that most things do not deserve your attention. This is not indifference, it is clarity. It is the ability to see what truly matters and ignore everything else without guilt or hesitation. One of the most powerful changes that happens at this level is how you experience conflict. Before, conflict would pull you in. It would trigger emotions. It would make you want to defend yourself or prove a point. But now, you see conflict differently. You see it as something that only exists if you choose to participate in it, and most of the time, you choose not to. You understand that engaging in unnecessary conflict is simply a waste of energy, and energy is something you now protect with discipline. This does not mean you avoid every challenge. It means you choose your battles carefully, and when you do engage, you do so with calmness and control, not emotion. Another shift happens in how you view people, because you no longer expect them to behave a certain way in order for you to feel at peace. You accept that people will act according to their own nature, their own level of awareness, and their own limitations. Instead of trying to change them, correct them, or react to them, you simply observe and adjust your distance accordingly. This creates a powerful sense of freedom because your peace is no longer dependent on how others behave. You stop taking things personally, and when you stop taking things personally, you remove one of the biggest sources of unnecessary suffering in your life. At this level, your energy becomes extremely focused because it is no longer scattered across reactions, explanations, and responses. You are not wasting mental energy on overthinking every situation. You are not draining emotional energy on unnecessary conflicts, and you are not losing focus by trying to manage how others see you. Instead, all of that energy is redirected inward toward your growth, your discipline, and your purpose. This creates a level of progress that most people never reach, not because they are not capable, but because they are constantly distracted by things that do not matter. You also begin to notice that your presence changes how others behave around you. When you are calm, controlled, and not easily provoked, people feel it. They may not understand it, but they sense that you are not someone who can be easily influenced or manipulated. This creates a natural form of respect that does not need to be demanded or explained. It comes from your behavior, your consistency, and your control. People begin to think twice before testing you, not because you said anything, but because your silence has already shown them everything they need to know. As you continue to live in this state, you realize that true strength is not about dominating others. It is about mastering yourself to the point where nothing external can disturb your inner state. You are no longer chasing control over situations. You are maintaining control over your response to those situations. This shift changes everything, because once you control your response, you control your experience, and once you control your experience, you control your life. The final realization that comes with this level is simple but powerful, that most things in life do not require your reaction, your explanation, or your response. Most situations will pass whether you engage with them or not. Most opinions will fade whether you agree with them or not, and most people will continue to think what they want, regardless of what you say. Once you understand this, you stop wasting energy trying to control what cannot be controlled, and you focus entirely on what can be controlled, which is yourself. This is the final level of a silent mind, a state where you are no longer driven by the need to prove, react, or explain, but by a deep sense of control, clarity, and independence. You move through life with a calm confidence that does not need to be announced, a strength that does not need to be displayed, and a presence that does not need to be explained. And in that state, you become something most people never reach. Someone who is completely in control of their mind, their energy, and their life. And when you reach this level, you understand something that changes everything forever, that the moment you stopped trying to prove your strength was the moment you truly became strong. Chapter 9. Absolute detachment, when nothing owns you anymore. There is a level of inner freedom that very few people ever reach, not because it is impossible, but because it requires letting go of things that most people are too attached to: their need for control, their need for validation, their need for emotional security from the outside world. This level is called absolute detachment, and it is not about disconnecting from life. It is about no longer being owned by it. It is the moment where your mind becomes so stable, so clear, and so self-contained that nothing external has the power to disturb your inner state unless you allow it. Most people live in a constant state of attachment without realizing it. They are attached to people, to outcomes, to opinions, to expectations, and to the idea that things should go a certain way. When those expectations are not met, they suffer. When people do not behave as expected, they react. When outcomes do not match their desires, they feel frustration, disappointment, or anger. Their entire emotional state is tied to things they do not fully control, and that is why their peace is always unstable. But when you step into absolute detachment, you begin to see a different reality. You begin to understand that attachment is the root of unnecessary suffering, and letting go is the beginning of real power. Detachment does not mean you stop caring, it means you stop clinging. You can still care about people, still work toward goals, still engage with life, but you do it without tying your peace to the outcome. You give your effort, but you release your need for a specific result. You connect with people, but you do not depend on them for your emotional stability. This creates a balance that most people never experience because they are either too attached or completely withdrawn. A silent mind finds the middle path, where you are fully involved but never controlled. One of the biggest shifts that happens at this level is how you respond to loss, rejection, and change. Before, these experiences would shake you because they felt personal. They felt like something was taken from you. But now, you see them differently. You see them as part of life, not as something that defines your worth or your direction. You understand that people come and go, situations change, and outcomes are never guaranteed, and instead of resisting this, you accept it. This acceptance removes the emotional weight from these experiences, allowing you to move forward without carrying unnecessary pain. Another powerful aspect of detachment is the ability to remain unaffected by praise and criticism. Most people are controlled by both. They feel good when praised and bad when criticized, and this creates a constant emotional dependency on external feedback. But when you are detached, both praise and criticism lose their power over you. You do not get carried away by compliments, and you do not get shaken by negative opinions. You see both as temporary, as reflections of others, rather than definitions of yourself. This creates a level of stability that cannot be easily influenced, because your self-worth is no longer tied to what others think. At this stage, your focus becomes sharper, because your mind is no longer distracted by unnecessary attachments. You are not constantly thinking about how others see you, you are not overanalyzing every situation, and you are not emotionally reacting to things that do not matter. This clarity allows you to direct your energy with precision, focusing only on what truly contributes to your growth and purpose. You become more effective, more disciplined, and more consistent, because your mind is not being pulled in multiple directions by emotional noise. Detachment also changes the way you experience success, because you are no longer chasing it from a place of need. Most people chase success to prove something, to gain validation, or to feel worthy. But when you are detached, success becomes something you pursue for growth, not for identity. You do the work, you put in the effort, but your sense of self does not depend on the result. This removes pressure, allowing you to perform better, think clearer, and stay consistent without being affected by temporary setbacks or external expectations. As your detachment deepens, your inner world becomes incredibly stable because it is no longer influenced by external fluctuations. Your emotions remain balanced, your thoughts remain clear, and your actions remain intentional regardless of what is happening around you. This stability is not something you force, it is something that naturally develops as you continue to let go of attachments that once controlled you. You begin to experience a sense of peace that is not dependent on circumstances, a peace that exists simply because your mind is no longer in conflict with reality. People around you will notice this change, even if they cannot fully understand it. They will see that you are not easily affected, that you do not react the way others do, and that you move through situations with a calmness that is rare. Some may admire it, some may misunderstand it, and some may even feel uncomfortable around it, because your detachment removes the usual ways people connect through emotional reactions. But none of that matters, because your focus is no longer on how others perceive you, it is on maintaining your inner stability. This level of detachment also gives you a unique kind of freedom, the freedom to make decisions without fear, the freedom to walk away from what no longer serves you, and the freedom to pursue your path without being held back by external expectations. You are no longer trapped by the fear of losing something, because you understand that nothing truly belongs to you permanently. Everything in life is temporary, and accepting this truth allows you to move forward without hesitation or attachment. The deeper you go into this state, the more you realize that control was never about controlling the outside world. It was about releasing your need to control it. Once you let go of that need, you stop fighting against reality, and instead you align with it. This alignment brings a level of ease into your life, not because things always go your way, but because you are no longer resisting what happens. You adapt, you adjust, and you continue moving forward without being emotionally disrupted. At the highest level of this understanding, something profound happens. You stop identifying with temporary things altogether. You are no longer defined by success or failure, by praise or criticism, by gain or loss. You become grounded in something deeper, something stable, something that does not change with circumstances. This is where true inner freedom exists, not in controlling everything, but in being unaffected by anything. This is absolute detachment, not a cold or disconnected state, but a powerful, balanced, and deeply controlled way of living. It is the point where nothing owns you anymore, not people, not outcomes, not opinions, and not situations. You are fully engaged with life, but completely free from its control. And when you reach this level, you realize something that most people never understand, that the moment you stopped holding on to everything was the moment you gained control over everything that truly matters. Chapter 10. The Return to Self, when you become untouchable from within. There comes a moment in your journey where everything you have practiced, every moment of silence you chose, every reaction you controlled, every explanation you held back, and every unnecessary response you avoided begins to come together, not as separate skills, but as a completely new way of being. This moment is not loud, it is not dramatic, and it does not announce itself, but it is powerful in a way that changes how you experience life from the inside out. It is the moment you return to yourself, not the version shaped by people, expectations, and emotional reactions, but the version that exists beneath all of that, calm, clear, and completely in control. Most people spend their lives moving away from themselves without even realizing it. They adapt to please others. They react to fit into situations. They explain themselves to be understood, and, over time, they lose connection with their own inner stability. Their identity becomes tied to how others see them, how situations unfold, and how they are treated. This creates a fragile sense of self, because it is constantly being influenced by things outside of their control. But when you begin to master silence, when you stop reacting, stop explaining, and stop responding unnecessarily, you slowly begin to remove all of these external layers, and what remains is something far more stable and powerful. The return to self is not about becoming someone new. It is about removing everything that was never truly you. It is about letting go of the habits, patterns, and emotional dependencies that were built over time, and reconnecting with a state of clarity that was always there, but buried under noise. This clarity is what allows you to move through life without being constantly pulled in different directions, because your center is no longer external, it is internal. You are no longer adjusting yourself based on what is happening around you. You are moving from a place that remains steady regardless of what happens. One of the most powerful shifts at this stage is the disappearance of emotional urgency. Before, everything felt urgent: the need to reply, the need to defend, the need to react, the need to prove. Your mind was constantly pushing you to act, to say something, to do something, as if every moment required immediate attention. But now, that urgency fades, and in its place comes patience. You begin to understand that not everything needs to be handled instantly, that most situations resolve themselves without your interference, and that acting from calmness is far more effective than acting from impulse. This patience gives you control, because you are no longer being rushed by your own emotions. Another deep transformation happens in how you experience yourself in relation to others. You no longer feel the need to be liked by everyone, to be understood by everyone, or to be accepted by everyone. You understand that people will see you based on their own perspective, and you no longer try to control that. This removes a huge weight from your mind, because you are no longer performing for an audience. You are simply existing as you are. And in that authenticity, you become far more stable, because your identity is no longer dependent on external feedback. As you continue to live in this state, your mind becomes incredibly quiet, not empty, but clear. Thoughts still come, emotions still arise, but they do not take over. You observe them, you understand them, and you let them pass without attaching yourself to them. This creates a level of inner peace that is not fragile, because it is not based on circumstances. It is a peace that exists because your mind is no longer in constant conflict, no longer reacting to everything, and no longer trying to control what it cannot control. Your actions also begin to change in a way that is subtle but powerful. You become more intentional, more precise, and more focused. You no longer act out of habit or emotional reaction, you act with awareness. When you speak, your words carry meaning because they are not driven by impulse. When you remain silent, it is not out of hesitation, but out of choice. This level of control makes your presence feel different because it is grounded, stable, and not easily influenced. People around you will start to notice this, even if they cannot fully explain it. They will see that you are not easily provoked, that you do not react the way others do, and that you carry a calmness that stands out in a world full of noise. Some will respect it, some will question it, and some may even feel uncomfortable around it because your stability reflects their own lack of control. But none of this affects you anymore because your focus is no longer on how others perceive you, it is on maintaining your inner state. At this level, you also develop a deep sense of trust in yourself, because you have proven through your actions that you can remain stable under pressure, that you can control your reactions, and that you can move through difficult situations without losing yourself. This trust becomes your foundation, because you know that no matter what happens, you will not break, you will not lose control, and you will not be easily shaken. This is what makes you untouchable, not in the sense that nothing ever happens to you, but in the sense that nothing has the power to control your inner world. The most important realization at this stage is that control was never about controlling life. It was about controlling your response to life. Once you master that, everything changes, because your experience is no longer dictated by external events, but by your internal state. You begin to see that peace, strength, and clarity were never something you had to find outside. They were always within you, waiting for you to remove the noise that was covering them. This is the return to self, a state where you are no longer divided, no longer reacting, no longer explaining, and no longer responding unnecessarily. You are whole, you are present, and you are in control. And in this state, you move through life with a quiet confidence that does not need to be proven, a strength that does not need to be shown, and a peace that does not depend on anything outside of you. And when you fully arrive here, you understand something that changes everything forever, that becoming untouchable was never about building walls against the world. It was about building a mind that nothing in the world could break. Chapter 11. Effortless Power, when control becomes your nature. There is a stage in your journey where everything you once had to practice with effort slowly transforms into something natural, something automatic, something that no longer requires constant attention or discipline in the way it once did. This is the stage of effortless power, a state where silence is no longer something you force, control is no longer something you struggle to maintain, and discipline is no longer something you have to remind yourself of every moment. It becomes who you are, the way you think, the way you respond, and the way you exist in the world, without needing to constantly correct yourself. In the beginning, everything feels difficult. You have to remind yourself not to react. You have to stop yourself from explaining, and you have to consciously choose silence in situations where your old habits are pulling you toward response. It feels unnatural at first, because your mind has been conditioned for years to operate in a reactive way. It wants to respond quickly, it wants to defend, it wants to prove, and breaking that pattern requires awareness and discipline. But as you continue to practice, something begins to shift, the effort starts to decrease, and the control starts to feel more natural. This is because your mind is being rewired through repetition. Every time you choose silence over reaction, every time you choose stillness over impulse, and every time you choose awareness over automatic behavior, you are strengthening a new pattern. Over time, this pattern becomes your default, and what once required effort becomes effortless. You no longer have to remind yourself not to react, because reacting is no longer your natural response. You no longer feel the urge to explain unnecessarily, because your mind has learned that explanation is not required for your stability. This is where true power begins, not when you can control yourself occasionally, but when control becomes your natural state. At this level, your mind operates from a place of calm awareness rather than emotional urgency. Situations that once triggered you no longer create the same internal reaction, not because you are suppressing your emotions, but because your perception has changed. You no longer see situations as threats to your identity or your ego. You see them as neutral events that do not require unnecessary engagement. This shift in perception removes the emotional charge from situations, making it easier to remain calm and controlled without effort. Another important aspect of effortless power is the disappearance of internal conflict. Before, there was always a struggle between what you felt and how you wanted to act. You might feel anger but try to stay calm. You might feel the urge to respond but try to remain silent, and this created tension within your mind. But now, that tension fades, because your emotions and your actions begin to align. You naturally feel less reactive, you naturally feel less need to explain, and you naturally choose silence when it is appropriate. This alignment creates a sense of ease, because you are no longer fighting yourself. Your energy also becomes more stable at this stage, because you are no longer wasting it on unnecessary reactions and thoughts. In the past, a single situation could drain your energy for hours or even days, because you would replay it in your mind, analyze it, and react to it repeatedly. But now, situations pass through your mind without leaving a heavy impact. You observe them, understand them, and move on without holding on to them. This allows your energy to remain consistent, focused, and available for things that truly matter. As this state becomes deeper, your presence begins to change in a way that others can feel. You no longer carry the restless energy of someone who is constantly reacting or trying to prove something. Instead, you carry a calm, grounded energy that feels stable and controlled. People may not be able to explain it, but they will notice that you are different, that you do not react the way others do, that you are not easily influenced, and that you seem unaffected by things that disturb most people. This presence creates a natural form of respect because it signals strength without the need to display it. Another transformation that occurs at this level is your relationship with time and patience. You no longer feel rushed to respond, rushed to act, or rushed to prove anything. You understand that everything unfolds in its own time, and you are comfortable allowing that process to happen without interference. This patience allows you to make better decisions because you are not acting from pressure or urgency. You are acting from clarity, and clarity leads to better outcomes in every area of life. Effortless power also changes the way you approach challenges because you no longer see them as threats to your stability. In the past, challenges might have triggered stress, frustration, or emotional reactions, but now they are simply situations to be handled. You approach them with calmness, analyze them clearly, and respond with intention. This makes you more effective because your actions are not clouded by emotion. You are able to think clearly even under pressure, and this ability becomes one of your greatest strengths. At the deepest level of this state, something profound happens. You stop identifying with the need to control everything consciously because control has already become part of your nature. You trust yourself completely. You trust your ability to remain calm, and you trust your ability to handle whatever comes your way. This trust removes the need for constant effort because you are no longer trying to maintain control. You are simply living from it. This is what effortless power truly is, not the absence of discipline, but the mastery of it to the point where it becomes natural. It is the stage where silence is no longer forced, reactions no longer control you, and your mind operates from a place of calm awareness without struggle. It is the result of consistent practice, patience, and the willingness to let go of old patterns that no longer serve you. And when you reach this level, you realize something that changes the way you see your entire journey, that the goal was never to force yourself into control, but to practice until control became who you are. Once it becomes your nature, everything becomes easier, clearer, and more stable. And in that state, you are no longer trying to be strong, you simply are. Chapter 12. The final truth. Nothing outside of you was ever in control. There is a moment, after everything you have learned, practiced, and experienced, where a deeper truth begins to reveal itself, not as an idea, not as a concept, but as something you can feel with complete clarity. It is the realization that changes everything, the realization that nothing outside of you was ever truly in control of your life, your peace, or your state of mind. For most of your life, it felt like the opposite was true. It felt like people, situations, and circumstances had the power to shape how you felt, how you reacted, and how you experienced the world. But as your awareness deepens, you begin to see that this was never reality. It was perception, and that perception was built on habits, conditioning, and unconscious reactions. From a young age, you were taught, directly or indirectly, that your emotions are a response to what happens around you. If someone respects you, you feel good. If someone disrespects you, you feel bad. If things go your way, you feel happy. If they do not, you feel frustrated. This pattern becomes so normal that you never question it. You simply accept that your inner state is dependent on your outer environment. But the truth is far more powerful than that. because what you are actually experiencing is not the world itself, but your interpretation of it. And that interpretation is something you have more control over than you were ever taught to believe. The moment you begin to understand this, your entire perspective starts to shift. You realize that it was never the situation itself that disturbed you, it was your reaction to it. It was never the opinion of others that affected your peace, it was the meaning you gave to that opinion. It was never the delay, the rejection, or the outcome that created suffering. It was the story your mind created around it. This does not mean that life becomes easy or that challenges disappear. It means that your relationship with those challenges changes completely, because you are no longer seeing them as things that control you. A silent mind sees this clearly, and because it sees clearly, it no longer reacts in the same way. It understands that reacting automatically is what gives the illusion of control to the outside world. The moment you react without awareness, you reinforce the belief that something external has power over you. But when you pause, when you observe, and when you choose your response consciously, you break that illusion. You begin to see that your power was never lost. It was simply being given away through unconscious behavior. This realization is not about denying emotions or pretending that things do not affect you. It is about understanding that emotions are internal experiences, not external forces. You feel them, you observe them, but you do not become controlled by them. This creates a distance between you and your reactions, a space where awareness exists, and in that space, you regain control over your state. This is where true freedom begins, not by changing the world around you, but by changing how you relate to it. As this understanding deepens, something even more powerful begins to happen. You stop trying to control everything. Most people spend their lives trying to control outcomes, trying to control people, and trying to control situations, because they believe that control will bring them peace. But the more they try to control, the more tension they create, because life does not always move according to their plans. A silent mind sees that control in the external world is limited, but control in the internal world is always available. And instead of fighting reality, it aligns with it, adapting, adjusting, and moving forward without resistance. This alignment creates a sense of ease that is difficult to describe, but powerful to experience. You are no longer in conflict with what is happening. You are not resisting every inconvenience, and you are not reacting to every unexpected change. You begin to flow with life instead of against it, and in that flow, you conserve energy, maintain clarity, and remain stable. This does not make you passive, it makes you precise, because your actions are no longer driven by emotional urgency, but by clear intention. Another transformation that happens at this level is the complete shift in how you see yourself. You no longer define yourself based on success or failure, based on praise or criticism, or based on how others perceive you. You begin to understand that these things are temporary, constantly changing, and not a true reflection of who you are. Your identity becomes rooted in something deeper, something stable, something that does not change with circumstances. This creates a sense of inner security that cannot be easily shaken, because it is not dependent on anything external. At this stage, your silence takes on a different meaning. It is no longer just a tool for control, it becomes a reflection of your understanding. You do not feel the need to speak unnecessarily, because you see clearly what matters and what does not. You do not feel the need to react, because you understand the nature of reactions. You do not feel the need to explain, because you are no longer trying to control how others see you. Your silence becomes natural, effortless, and deeply powerful, because it is rooted in awareness rather than discipline. As you continue to live from this place, your experience of life becomes simpler, not because life itself is simple, but because you are no longer complicating it with unnecessary reactions, expectations, and attachments. You handle situations with clarity, you move through challenges with stability, and you maintain your inner peace regardless of what is happening outside. This simplicity is not weakness, it is mastery, because it comes from understanding what truly matters and letting go of everything that does not. The final realization that emerges from this journey is both simple and profound, that the power you were searching for was never outside of you, it was always within you, waiting to be recognized and reclaimed. You were never controlled by people, situations, or outcomes. You were controlled by your reactions to them. And once you take responsibility for those reactions, once you bring awareness to them, and once you choose them consciously, everything changes. This is the final truth. Not something you learn once and move on from, but something you continue to deepen throughout your life. It is the understanding that your inner world is always within your control, and that control is not about force, but about awareness. When you live from this understanding, you no longer feel powerless, you no longer feel dependent, and you no longer feel at the mercy of external circumstances. And in that state, you reach a level of freedom that most people never experience, because you are no longer trying to control the world, you are mastering yourself within it. Your silence becomes your strength, your awareness becomes your guide, and your control becomes your foundation. And when you fully understand this, you realize something that changes everything forever, that nothing outside of you ever had power over you, until you gave it that power, and the moment you stopped giving it away was the moment you truly became free. At the end of this journey, nothing about your outer world may look dramatically different, but everything within you has changed in a way that cannot be reversed. You no longer move through life as someone who reacts to everything, explains to everyone, and responds to every situation as if your peace depends on it. Instead, you have stepped into a completely different state of being, one where your mind is steady, your emotions are controlled, and your actions are intentional. This is not a temporary mindset, it is a transformation in how you experience life itself. You have learned that every reaction was a piece of your power being given away, that every unnecessary explanation was a sign of dependence on validation, and that every impulsive response was a moment where control slipped out of your hands. But more importantly, you have learned that all of this can be changed, not by forcing yourself into silence, but by understanding why silence is powerful in the first place. You now see clearly that your peace was never meant to be dependent on people, opinions, or outcomes. It was always meant to come from within you. The principles you have absorbed are simple, but their impact is deep and lasting. You pause instead of reacting, you remain silent instead of explaining, and you choose awareness instead of impulse. These are not just habits, they are tools that reshape your entire inner world. Over time, they build a level of stability that cannot be easily shaken, because your strength is no longer tied to what happens outside. It is rooted in how you respond from within. As you continue forward, you will still face challenges, you will still encounter difficult people, and life will still present situations that test your control. But now, you are different. You do not see these moments as problems. You see them as opportunities to reinforce your strength. Every situation becomes a chance to practice silence, to maintain control, and to protect your energy. This is how your mind continues to grow stronger, not through perfection, but through consistent awareness and discipline. You will also notice that as you change, your environment begins to change with you. People who relied on your reactions will no longer have the same influence. Unnecessary conflicts will fade, and your presence will carry a quiet strength that others can feel. You will not need to prove anything, because your behavior will speak for itself. Your silence will say more than words ever could, and your control will create a sense of respect that does not need to be demanded. Most importantly, you will begin to experience a level of peace that is stable and consistent, Not because life has become easy, but because you have stopped allowing small things to disturb your inner world. This peace is not fragile, it is not temporary, and it does not depend on external conditions. It exists because your mind is no longer in constant reaction, no longer seeking validation, and no longer trying to control what cannot be controlled. This is what it means to have a silent mind and unbreakable inner strength. It is not about being distant or disconnected. It is about being grounded, aware, and in control of yourself at all times. It is about knowing when to speak and when to remain silent, when to act and when to hold back, and when to engage and when to walk away. This balance is where true power exists, not in dominating others, but in mastering yourself. And as you carry this understanding forward, remember one simple truth that holds everything together, that your power has always been in your control over yourself, not over the world. The less you react, the less you explain, and the less you respond, the more you protect that power. And the more you protect that power, the stronger, calmer, and more unbreakable you become. You are no longer someone who is easily shaken. You are no longer someone who needs to prove. You are no longer someone controlled by the outside world. You have become someone who moves in silence, thinks with clarity, and stands with unshakable strength. And that is a power that nothing can take away.